The story starts in Arboral year 1294, the battlefield is covered with bodies and scattered soldiers. People move through the field collecting severed heads and checking them for rewards. One man holds up a head and asks if it is worth anything. Another man examines it and states that it is only a rancor, so there is no reward for it. Nearby, a soldier notices the plume on another severed head and explains that it belongs to an officer. He instructs the others to take the head to Gerhardt and collect a shiny silver grosso as payment. A young boy sits among the dead and reaches toward a strange metal instrument lying on the ground. The boy picks up the instrument and notices blood pooled inside its tube. He finds it dirty and continues examining it. He empties the blood from the instrument and places it against his lips. After trying it, he regarded it as a new instrument for himself. At this point there is no way anyone could guess what kind of story this is about to become, so subscribe and stick around for what happens next. The scene shifts to a military camp marked by a flag. Someone remarks that the tactics used in the previous battle are effective. As wounded soldiers receive treatment in the camp, a commander orders the men to begin their march toward the holy territory at daybreak. He instructs them to show their valor in the battles ahead. A soldier informs Gerhardt that the report is complete. As Gerhardt focuses on his task, the soldier addresses him directly and asks what he is doing. Gerhardt presses a blade against the messenger's face and carves a mark into his skin. He explains that the mark serves as propaganda for their mercenary company. As he finishes carving, Gerhardt explains that they mark some captured foreheads and then send those men back. He tells the messenger that the work is done and orders him to leave. The marked messenger runs away from the camp. Gerhardt explains that the men they release spread their reputation wherever they go. He continues carving another mark while explaining that a wider reputation brings more work and more coin for the company. The soldier states that he understands. Gerhardt explains that mercenaries depend on a steady flow of work, unlike regular soldiers. He adds that the marks serve another purpose. While carving, the guy recites a prayer and Gerhardt explains that the marks act as a reminder for the men who receive them. He explains that in these times a man can be alive one day and gone the next. He says the mark reminds them that they once lived a little life. A soldier calls out to Gerhardt while Gerhardt continues his work. A tall man approaches the camp. He notices Luca nearby and asks if Luca has finished looting the bodies. Luca steps forward and states that he has come to collect what he is owed. Gerhardt looks at him without replying. He says that Luca still owes him a large debt for being taken in and raised. Luca argues that he is only trying to repay what Gerhardt spent on him and asks how much remains. Our guy asks how many more battles he must survive before the debt is cleared and says he has already done his part as Gerhardt's bugler and more besides. A nearby soldier remarks that Luca has not finished his part yet. The guy adds that blowing a horn from the safety of the rear guard does not count for much. A soldier tells Luca to get off his high horse. He says Luca can talk all he wants after bringing back a general's head. The soldier continues by saying that anyone can blow a horn. Gerhardt asks the soldier if he has ever picked up a bugle himself. The soldier says he has not and explains that he never had a reason to. The soldier says that the task seems easier than risking his neck on the front lines. Gerhardt agrees with him. Gerhardt calls Luca over and tells him to play a call for them. Our boy looks over and waits for instructions. He tells Luca to make it loud and says the tune does not matter. Luca states that he understands. Gerhardt points toward a distant tree line and tells Luca to make the sound reach that far. Luca asks why and Gerhardt tells him to try. Luca raises the bugle and blows into it with all his strength. The sound bursts across the camp and carries into the distance. Soldiers nearby cover their ears while the blast echoes across the field and reaches the forest. Birds take flight from the trees as the sound spreads through the area. The men watch in silence while Luca lowers the bugle. Gerhardt turns toward the soldiers and asks if any of them can manage to do anything like that. The soldier hesitates in silence before answering Gerhardt that they cannot. Gerhardt pulls back his bloody blade as a prisoner groans in pain, and then he calls out to get Luca's attention. He tells Luca that if he wants to leave the mercenary group he should not waste another minute, but warns him about being out on his own. Gerhardt advises Luca to become a master musician, though he notes that Luca has very low odds of reaching that dream. Luca spits on the ground. Our guy swears as he turns around quickly, his cloak flapping as a nearby soldier watches him walk away. The soldier looks closely at the back of Luca's head and wonders if the object sticking out of his hair is a horn or a branch. The soldier points toward the boy and asks Gerhardt about the object on his head, and Gerhardt acknowledges the horn before calling for the next man to step forward. Gerhardt notes that the growth is disturbing and states that it has been sprouting from the boy's head since he was a baby. He suspects that the unusual growth on Luca's head is the reason his parents abandoned him as a baby, and he notes that even the slave trade would have no interest in someone like him. The soldier wonders aloud if the boy is even human, which only makes Gerhardt laugh. Gerhardt dismisses any idea of the boy being possessed by a demon, stating that he is simply a cheeky child while he continues carving a mark into a groaning prisoner. He adds that the boy tells the wildest lies at times, causing the soldier to ask for clarification about those statements. As Luca walks away into the distance, Gerhardt explains to the soldier that the boy claims to be able to see sound, a concept he dismisses as complete nonsense. The soldier remains silent while Gerhardt stretches his back and tells him to ignore the boy, stating that he has a message to deliver to the army leadership. Gerhardt announces that his company will excuse themselves from the scheduled march tomorrow, prompting the soldier to ask for the reason behind this choice. The man looks upward and explains that he is thinking they are running too low on food and supplies. Gerhardt explains that the mercenary company will forage for food and supplies locally. Later, the mercenaries attack a small settlement, and a soldier reports that there are about 100 villagers in the area. A soldier states that the local storehouses are nearly empty after the winter. Gerhardt states they need to gather 10 days of food to sustain their group of 300 people. Gerhardt orders his men to limit their celebration and focus on packing the essentials since they cannot stay long, and a soldier obeys the command. A soldier asks Gerhardt how many prisoners they need to mark on the forehead, and the man agrees it is a fair point while Luca walks past them. Our guy pulls an empty wooden sled across the ground as he heads toward a tall stone tower. Luca opens a door with his torch and searches the room, wondering if there is any sheet music or old hymns left inside. He follows a scratching noise to a wooden barrel, and when he lifts the lid, he finds a terrified young girl shaking inside. Our guy looks down into the barrel in silence, and the girl looks up to ask him for help. Luca asks the girl if she has a family, and she points out of the barrel toward a nearby area. Our guy stands with his torch inside the room where the dead bodies of the villagers lie on the floor. Luca turns his attention back to the girl and states that he wants to ask her a question. He holds up his torch and asks the girl if the village has any sheet music or musical instruments. Later, the girl runs away into the dark forest while Luca watches her from behind. Our guy sits on a hill as the laughter of the mercenaries echoes from the camp, leaving a basket filled with sheet music and a wind instrument beside him. Luca looks at a sheet of paper and notes that the villagers actually had plenty of music, reflecting on what kind of piece it is. He looks down at a piece of sheet music and notes that he needs to learn how to read it. Luca wipes his horn with a cloth, lifts the instrument to his lips, and begins to blow into it. A pattern of glowing dots connected by lines rises into the dark night sky from the end of the horn. Gerhardt watches from the camp as Luca sits on a distant rock playing his horn with a smile. Gerhardt walks over and asks Luca how he is doing, causing Luca to look back. He sits down next to Luca and remarks that the boy is practicing his music alone again while Luca continues to play a steady note. Gerhardt states that a low mercenary can never become a master musician while Luca continues to play his horn. The man says that he saw Luca let the village child escape, which causes Luca to stop playing his horn. Gerhardt rests his chin on his hand and states that the escape does not matter to him since the company does not have the luxury of taking prisoners anyway. He explains that the main problem is that Luca has never come to terms with this mercenary life. Gerhardt reminds our guy that he is their bugler and the one who issues commands to the entire group. He tells the boy to show the other men that he is one of them by sharing the loot and enjoying the plunder. Luca holds the instrument near his lips and states that there is nothing for him to enjoy. He adds that there is nothing fun about the horrible things they do to people. Gerhardt looks away and admits that Luca has a fair point, acknowledging that there is nothing proper about their actions. He tells the boy that it still matters and instructs him to drop his pride so he can learn to enjoy what he has been given. Gerhardt asks our boy if he knows the meaning of being a maestro, and Luca explains that it is simply a job where a person plays music to earn money. The boy states that he does not care about titles as long as he gets to perform. Gerhardt observes that playing the horn brings Luca joy. Gerhardt sets aside the talk about seeing sound and admits that dreaming of becoming a maestro is acceptable, and our boy states that it is definitely not a bad thing. Luca states that he loves playing his bugle, but clarifies that his motivation is not just a love for the music itself. The boy explains that he hates everything in his life except for the music. Luca thinks about the rows of corpses hanging from trees, spears covered in the rotting guts of the dead, and girls his own age who are defiled by grown men. He realizes that when he plays his bugle and sees his music, he is able to completely ignore all of that horror. Luca explains that he wants to take lessons from veteran buglers and learn to read music at a university because most of the world is bad and he prefers to do something that is not. Our boy asks Gerhardt if he can really be blamed for wanting to leave his current life far behind. Gerhardt calls out to Luca and asks if the horn on his head has grown a little bit. Later, a loud horn echoes across a massive army of soldiers holding spears under the sky. Gerhardt rides on a horse while carrying his spear forward with the army. Luca marches alongside the infantryman and notes to himself that his head is very itchy right as Gerhardt calls his name. Gerhardt adjusts his armor and informs Luca that he is assigned to be with the infantry today. Luca asks for the reason behind this change, and Gerhardt explains that they are taking commands from proper officers in this battle and that even he is in the vanguard as cavalry. Gerhardt explains that their employer, the general, does not want the mercenary company to claim any of the glory. He points across the camp and states that he cannot issue commands through Luca, ordering the boy to join the reserve corps instead. Gerhardt notes that Luca is almost 14 years old and states that the boy needs to start spending time training with a spear. The man lets out a large yawn while another mercenary stands next to a horse nearby. The mercenary looks toward the distant horizon and notes that the enemy appears to have about 1,000 men, and Gerhardt agrees that it looks that way. The mercenary adds that the enemy has 700 fewer men than their own side, making victory certain, while Gerhardt nods in agreement. An officer on horseback shouts to the troops that once the 1st Cavalry Squadron charges, Squadrons 2 and 3 must stand by and wait for the signal. The officer rides away into the field while repeating his orders for the 2nd and 3rd Squadrons to wait for the signal. Gerhardt looks at Colin and asks if he has a dream of his own. Colin asks the man what kind of dream he means and suggests that his dream might be to eat a whole turkey by himself. Colin adds that he also wants to visit a classy brothel where proper knights receive service, prompting Gerhardt to ask if that is his only dream. Colin asks if that statement was the wrong answer, and Gerhardt replies that it is not wrong because he would say the exact same thing. As a bird flies over the military formations, Gerhardt reflects that he might be sick and tired of that kind of life. Colin says that there is nothing else to look forward to, causing him to wonder what greater pleasures exist in the world. Gerhardt agrees with the statement as they look toward a flag flying above rows of spears. The scene shows a group of cloaked figures and riders with large metal tubes for heads traveling together under a large flag. The tube head asks Demi if she can see the boy. Demi looks across the field and confirms that she spots him standing among the row of soldiers. Demi observes that the boy appears small for his age and estimates him to be about 14 years old. The tube-headed commander wonders if the boy has already awakened his power and expresses a desire to evaluate his abilities during the battle. As a horn sounds across the field and the massive army begins to move, the commander notes that the battle is starting. The commander calls out to Zoe. He instructs Zoe to go wild in battle as she normally likes to do. The commander explains that the Allied forces will take care of the rest of the enemy once Zoe has reduced their numbers. Zoe stands calmly among the ranks of soldiers before stepping forward with a bare foot and walking out alone onto the open battlefield. She watches from behind as the enemy cavalry charges toward her across the field, their horses creating a heavy thumping sound as they close the distance. An enemy rider charges forward on his horse, causing a soldier to watch in confusion and note that their own forces are not moving forward and no arrows have been shot while Zoe stands alone before the opposing lines. Zoe pulls down her hood to reveal large branch-like horns growing from her head, making an enemy soldier wonder what is wrong with her. A charging horse rears up directly in front of Zoe as the rider screams out, but she remains completely still before the animal. Zoe reaches out and grabs the horse's front leg with her bare hand, causing the horse to tilt and sending the rider flying upside down. She uses her immense strength to swing the entire horse by its leg and fling the animal and its rider high into the air. The thrown horse crashes heavily into the other oncoming riders, knocking them off their mounts and destroying the enemy cavalry formation. The force of the counterattack throws horses and riders high into the air, completely shattering the advancing cavalry line. From a high view above the field, horses and men crash to the ground and scatter in total disarray. Zoe stands motionless from behind as armor pieces and defeated soldiers fall to the earth around her. Gerhardt watches the destruction in silence before realizing they must retreat immediately. Colin asks if Gerhardt saw what happened, and Gerhardt orders him to get word to all of the troops. Gerhardt explains that the enemy has brought a foe that is completely beyond their understanding, while Colin asks for clarification on that statement. He rides away quickly to find Luca so the boy can signal the retreat, telling Colin to save his own life, and Colin complies with the order. An allied officer stops Gerhardt and points out that no retreat has been called, asking where he is going and reminding him that his orders are to defeat the enemy warrior, leaving Gerhardt unable to give a clear response. Far away, a companion soldier stands with Luca and looks out toward the distant battlefield, noting that the fighting has begun at the front lines. He states that while their current position is boring, he is glad to be safe from danger, and he asks the boy if he agrees. The companion turns toward the boy as Luca begins to groan and crouch down in pain. Luca drops his helmet and collapses further as the guy asks what is wrong with him. Our boy explains that his head is causing him severe pain, and the companion instructs the boy to lean on him for support. The guy carries Luca through the ranks of soldiers, shouting for everyone to make way for an injured person. He directs Luca toward a ruined hovel in the distance where they can rest, and our boy thanks him. A horse flies through the air above them as the companion remarks that any excuse to leave the battle line is acceptable, while Luca continues to groan. Luca remembers being told that he was dead weight in his first battle too, right as an object flies overhead and hits the ground with a loud thud. A cracking sound comes from the branch on his head, and Luca lies flat on his back among the broken wood. He rests on the ground inside the ruined building while breathing heavily and groaning. Luca cries out in pain as he grips a sharp piece of broken wood that has pierced his belly. Our boy pants and sweats from the pain before pulling the broken wooden piece out of his chest with a sharp tug. Luca looks out from the hills at the distant battlefield where the main armies clash with loud shouts. He sits near a stone wall breathing heavily as the branch on his head makes another cracking sound. The infantry soldiers clash with the enemy and Luca notes that their side is losing, wondering if Gerhardt made a mistake with his plan. Luca crouches down and decides that he must escape from the battlefield. A heavy stream of blood pours from his open wound, and his legs give out as he drops toward the floor. He hits the ground hard and lies completely flat on his stomach. Blood drips from his side and pools onto the ground with a splash. Luca looks down at the floor and considers the possibility that he should have left the broken wooden piece inside his body. Our boy tells himself that he cannot put the wooden piece back now. His eyes slowly close as his remaining strength fades away. Luca collapses onto his forearms with a heavy thud and silently curses his situation. Lying motionless on the dirt, Luca reflects on his life and notes that he never even learned how to read music. From an overhead view, Luca appears small among the broken wood and scattered debris. He looks at the floor and acknowledges that this is the end of his life. A tear rolls down the face of Luca. He looks ahead and sees a dead soldier lying on the ground in front of him. The corpse has the mercenary company mark deeply carved into its forehead. Luca remembers Gerhardt saying that he marks the captured men to give them a reminder that they once lived a little bit of life. He looks down in complete silence as blood runs down his face. Our boy struggles to breathe and clenches his fist before dropping heavily to his knees. He realizes that he is dying, spits a mouthful of blood onto the ground, and pauses to consider his situation. Luca suddenly stands up and raises his bugle to his lips. He reasons that if the entire mercenary company dies in this battle, there will be nobody left to remember him, even if they are just basic thugs. The branch on Luca's head makes a distinct cracking sound as it grows toward the sky. He concludes that it is still better for his companions to be alive than to be dead and gone. Arrows fly through the air around a military flag as Gerhardt notes that the enemy troops are mostly gathered together and wonders if they should take action. An officer states that they will not move yet. Gerhardt raises his wooden shield on horseback to block the falling arrows while considering if the battle is already over. He instructs the nearby riders to wait and see what happens next. A large barrage of arrows rains down from the sky as the massive infantry formation shouts and runs across the open field. The front lines are completely pincered from both the front and behind with no available way out. In addition, both wings of the army face a direct barrage of incoming crossbow bolts. A soldier remarks to the others that arguing with the troops who wanted to flee was a bad move. The military units become completely mixed together, leaving no one to take proper command of the forces. Gerhardt looks around from his horse and asks about the location of the woman who threw the horse. A nearby soldier answers that she appears to have fallen back after causing all of that destruction. Gerhardt considers the identity of the horned woman and notes that she might be a relative of Luca. He points his gloved hand upward and states that there is no time to think about the matter now. He commands his men to break through with the cavalry, keep the horses alive until the signal sounds, and inform the infantry that they are carving a path through the enemy. Gerhardt reflects on their situation and notes that if they had Luca with them, they could have made a move much sooner. A loud horn sound begins to echo through the area. A massive network of glowing lines and dots bursts across the sky above the battlefield. Gerhardt and the surrounding infantry stop to look up at the large light pattern. The glowing connected dots spread widely across the clouds. From an overhead view, the soldiers stand completely still in surprise, and the light pattern reflects clearly inside Gerhardt's open eye. The soldiers look directly up at the sky, and a man states that the glowing lights look like stars. Soldiers look up at the sky in silence. One soldier states that the noise sounds like a signal to retreat. Gerhardt recalls the statement about seeing sound. He speaks Luca's name as he reflects on the situation. A straight pillar of sound rises from the distant landscape. The tube-headed commander and his companions stand on a hill and watch the beam reach into the sky. The commander states that they have just witnessed the awakening of the boy's power. His companion agrees with the statement. The tube-head places his hand against his metal head. He notes that they now have a lot to look forward to in the future. The commander reflects on how thrilling it is when a new companion joins their ranks. Meanwhile, a bright light glows directly on Luca's forehead. Our boy kneels on the ground while holding his bugle. He looks upward at the connected lines. Luca laughs quietly to himself as the connected lines fade from the sky. He presses the instrument back against his lips to sound the bugle once more. A loud blast of sound rises from the ground as Luca sits in the open field. The glowing pattern stretches across the sky above the gathered military forces. Both soldiers stare at the light. Gerhardt remains on his horse and looks forward at the massive beam of light rising. He looks ahead and wonders what is happening on the field. Gerhardt observes the light and realizes it marks the exact edge of the enemy encirclement. He notes that the signal points directly to the area where he planned to break through. The man looks upward and realizes that the rain of arrows has stopped falling from the sky. Gerhardt shouts a loud command for the cavalry to make ready for their advance. The nearby soldiers look around and mutter to each other in confusion. He tells his men to look at the beam of light and commands them to smash through the enemy lines at that exact spot. A soldier speaks to the captain and states that the sound is actually the call to retreat. Gerhardt states that the sound is from Luca and explains that the boy is showing them a way out. He shouts for the infantry to make way as he rides his horse through the ranks of soldiers. Gerhardt bellows a command to charge as his horse springs forward into a gallop. The mercenary cavalry lets out a loud battle cry as they ride forward together. Gerhardt guides his horse down the middle of the field directly toward the pillar of light. The cavalry crashes into the rows of foot soldiers to break through the enemy lines. The horse hooves crash heavily into the enemy infantry, trampling their bodies and crushing them onto the ground. Gerhardt looks back from his mount and notes that he has successfully broken through the enemy lines. Luca takes a quick breath and blows into his bugle once more, sending another column of light into the sky near Gerhardt. Gerhardt hears the new call and observes that the position of the light has shifted. A soldier points his sword toward the field and informs Gerhardt that the signal is over there now. Gerhardt turns his attention toward the new direction and acknowledges that the signal has indeed moved. He gallops forward and commands his men to follow the light and the music. Gerhardt tells his men to break the enemy ranks and clear an escape path for their allies. He rides forward on his horse and realizes that he is not the only one experiencing the signal. Gerhardt observes that all of the allied soldiers on the battlefield understand Luca's signals as they move forward with their spears. An archer releases an arrow and Gerhardt notes that the soldiers are not just seeing the sound. He reflects that the actual meaning behind the sound is directly entering their minds while a large amount of arrow flies toward them. Arrows strike the soldiers on the field while Gerhardt notes that the boy is guiding them through the battle. The infantrymen run toward the glowing border as a soldier shouts for everyone to reach the line on the double. An officer orders his men to go after the enemy and leave no one alive while the infantry units charge across the field. The soldiers cross the glowing marks on the ground as a fighter spins around with his shield to face an attacker. Allied soldiers clash with the enemy along the glowing boundary, striking out with their weapons to push the opposing lines back. An enemy soldier receives a fatal blow to the neck and realizes that the entire Allied army turned around at once because they were commanded by the horn call. A nearby soldier shouts for everyone to run to the next line to save their lives. The retreating troops sprint across the open field toward the distant pillar of light, shouting orders to form ranks and fall back together. Luca sits quietly on the grass and looks up at the sky, wondering how his music caused the lights to appear. While more soldiers run past him, our boy reflects that he has always been able to see sound but never thought about sharing that vision with other people. Luca looks at his instrument and remembers that playing music and seeing it by himself used to be enough for him as dozens of infantrymen hurry to join the retreat. From an overhead view, the scattered troops gather together and align into a single organized line across the battlefield. The large, organized group of soldiers stands in a tight block formation on the battlefield while others scatter across the ground. Above them, a massive glowing pattern of straight lines and dots begins to spread across the field. Luca blows into his bugle with wide eyes and blood smeared across his forehead. He realizes that he is now almost enjoying the situation while rows of allied spearmen stand beneath the giant glowing grid that fills the sky. Gerhardt looks back at the glowing pattern in the sky while riding his horse across the field. He pulls tightly on the reins to change his direction. The man gallops forward on his horse and shouts loudly to Colin that Colin is in command now. Colin turns around on his horse in surprise and asks the captain where he is going. Gerhardt turns his head back with a grimace and yells that the enemy is coming, telling Colin to save himself. He grips his weapon and notes that the boy has always been a handful to deal with. He speaks Luca's name as he charges forward on horseback and strikes down an enemy soldier. Gerhardt is surrounded by enemy foot soldiers pointing their spears directly at his horse. He looks up at the glowing lines in the sky and realizes that this pattern is exactly what Luca saw. From a high hill, Luca sits and looks out over the wide battlefield below where the armies are moving. Nearby, a flag waves over the marching troops while Luca remains seated on the dirt. Our boy looks up with a bloody face and asks if they saw his action. Beside him, tiny new leaves sprout from the branch on his head with a quiet sound. Luca loses his remaining strength and slumps forward toward the ground. Before he hits the dirt, a traveler reaches out and catches his arm to support him. The tall man holds the exhausted boy securely and greets him, telling Luca that he did a good job. Luca remains silent as his eyes grow heavy with exhaustion. A hooded woman with a curved horn on her head tells Luca to sit still for a moment while the boy watches her closely. The woman kneels down and places her hand over Luca's open wound. Her hand begins to glow with a bright light. She breathes heavily and breaks into a sweat as she absorbs the injury. She informs Luca that she has successfully taken on half of his wound. The hooded woman tells Luca that her healing action will keep him breathing, but she warns him to be careful because it cannot replace the blood he has lost. Suddenly, Gerhardt calls out to get their attention. Gerhardt walks toward the group from a distance and states that he wants to know what is happening. He appears heavily battered and covered in blood. Luca looks up and speaks Gerhardt's name as his commander approaches the gathered group. The tube-headed commander, the tall traveler, the hooded woman, and another companion carrying an unconscious person all stand together outside a ruined wooden hovel. Our boy rests on the ground and looks toward the side. The tube-headed commander crouches down directly in front of the boy while the other companions look on in silence. The commander states that they have come for Luca. The boy looks up blankly, unable to understand the statement. The commander explains to Luca that this information may be a lot to take in, but the boy is not an ordinary human. He explains that Luca is branch hexed and belongs to a group of people called the Branched. He adds that the branches are remarkable individuals who possess wondrous powers. The commander states that the light Luca projected on the battlefield is the power of his branch hex. He explains that a person buds and awakens to these special abilities at 14 years of age. He crouches on the ground and invites the boy to join his company as their new bugler. Gerhardt interrupts from the side to get their attention. He walks over from a distance while holding his injured midsection. He tells the commander that he is sorry to disrupt the offer because the boy belongs with him and his mercenary band. Gerhardt states that if the commander wants to take the boy, there is a specific condition that must be met. Blood drips down past Gerhardt's eye as he presses his hand against his wound. The tube-headed commander looks back and tells Gerhardt to state his condition clearly. The man looks at the commander and tells him to make sure they teach the boy music. Luca looks up at Gerhardt in response to his words. The tube-headed commander remains silent for a moment before asking if that is the entire request. The commander asks for the reason behind that specific demand. Gerhardt looks down and states that he does not know and cannot explain it himself. Gerhardt explains that he has only ever seen the terrible things that fill this rotten world. He adds that he believes the boy somehow sees something more than that. The man notes that the commander looks like an important holy leader. He states his belief that the leader can make this future happen for the boy. The commander turns to Luca and asks if this arrangement is acceptable to him. Our boy looks down and confirms that it is exactly what he wants. The commander rests his hand against his leg and states that the matter is now settled. He looks out toward the open landscape and announces that they will now depart. The commander walks away from the hovel while his companions support the exhausted boy as they exit through the doorway together. Luca looks down in silence as they leave the ruined building behind. Our boy calls out to Gerhardt from across the open landscape under the cloudy sky. He looks back and asks Gerhardt how he liked his playing, while Gerhardt listens in silence. Gerhardt answers that he does not care much for the arts, but he states that the boy sounded better than ever. Luca acknowledges the statement and says goodbye as he turns away, and Gerhardt bids him farewell in return. The companion carries Luca away through the ruined building while the boy looks down and lets out a quiet chuckle. Luca remembers Gerhardt stating that he sounded better than ever, causing the boy to cover his face as his quiet laughter turns into tears. Tears stream down Luca's face as he continues to cry and laugh while being carried away. Gerhardt sits completely still on the dirt floor inside the ruined hovel when an outside voice calls out to him from behind. An enemy soldier announces that they found another survivor, and another asks if they should take him prisoner. A soldier notes that they will not get a ransom for Gerhardt, so they decide there is no need to keep him alive and state that they will just take his head. An enemy soldier swings his blade down toward Gerhardt while stating that he does not know how much money the captain's head will bring them. Blood sprays high into the air against the sky as the weapon strikes. The season changes to spring in Thermi, the holy capital, as a bird flies over the tightly packed buildings of the city. Luca lies flat on a bed inside a building, staring blankly up at the high stone ceiling. The tube-headed commander notices the boy opening his eyes and notes that he is finally awake. Luca sits up in his bed inside a massive hall with tall arched windows while the commander sits quietly on a stool beside him. Our boy looks around his new surroundings and asks the commander about their current location. The commander explains that they are inside the barracks infirmary located in the holy capital city of Thermi, adding that Luca became unconscious during their journey there. The commander places a hand on his chest and apologizes for neglecting to introduce himself first. He explains that he is the head and pontiff of the Spire Church. He adds that he stands above everyone else within this holy territory, instructing the boy to call him Your Holiness. The pontiff extends his gloved hand and tells the boy that it is now his turn to introduce himself. The boy pauses in silence before preparing to speak. The boy states that he was raised by the mercenary company and worked as a bugler. He looks forward with a tired expression as he begins to speak his name. The boy stares ahead as he considers the name that Gerhardt originally gave to him. He sits up fully in his bed, looks over at the leader, and tells him to call him Luca. Luca focuses his attention back on the pontiff and states that his true goal is to become a maestro. The pontiff acknowledges the statement and tells Luca that he will gladly guide him toward achieving that dream. He raises a single finger to present a condition, explaining that in return Luca must help him defend the realm. The pontiff looks through the window frames and explains that he is referring to his holy territory. Luca listens closely as the leader adds that this location is also the source of power for all branch hexed individuals. Our boy looks out the large window at a massive stone tower outside while the pontiff instructs him that he will be responsible for guarding that very spire. The scene shifts to the top of a giant wooden structure stretching into the sky during Arboral year 1294, noting that it was a specific age. The massive spire towers high above a vast city of rooftops during a historical period when people fought wars over these structures. The second chapter begins as a large stone spire stands tall under a cloudy sky. The tubehead explains that the spires are an inheritance left behind for them by an ancient and advanced civilization. A horse-drawn carriage moves down a busy cobblestone street lined with citizens and tall buildings. He continues his narration, stating that countless cultural and technological relics are located inside the structures, and it is through the analysis of these items that humanity has managed to progress this far. As the carriage travels past the city structures, the man looks out from the window and notes that the spire serves as both the wellspring of civilization and the primary symbol of their faith. Inside the vehicle, the guy sits with his arms crossed and repeats that their religion, Spirism, is concerned with overseeing the spire. He adds that he leads this faith in his role as the pontiff and asks if Luca is able to follow his explanation. The tubehead acknowledges that this information is common knowledge, but Luca rests his head on his hand and responds that he does not know anything about those matters because he was raised by a rough crowd that did not care about education. The pontiff reassures Luca that it is no trouble and states that the boy will learn as he goes forward. The leader's long helmet knocks against the frame of the carriage with a dull sound, and Luca watches him in silence. As the carriage drives away down the empty town street, Luca points out that the leader's helmet looks quite stuffy, but the pontiff answers that the headwear does not bother him at all. The vehicle comes to a stop in a wooded area. Luca stands on the dirt path and looks toward a dark stone archway built into an overgrown hillside while the pontiff exits the carriage behind him. He guides the way, instructing Luca to follow him through a dark stone archway built into the grassy hillside. They walk up a flight of stone stairs inside the dark tunnel while our boy looks back over his shoulder as he follows the leader. Luca asks where they are going, and the pontiff explains that they are heading to his new home from this day forward as they approach a bright opening at the top of the stairs. The man states that Luca will now live his life at Greatwood Manor, a massive stone estate with a giant tree growing behind it. They emerge from the underground tunnel onto the open lawn, where Luca looks around in surprise as the pontiff adds that the boy will reside there along with his kin. A loud creaking sound echoes through the grand interior hall of the manor, revealing a large winding staircase beneath a massive hanging chandelier. The pontiff explains to Luca that knowledge regarding branched individuals and their unique hexes is kept completely secret from ordinary people while they continue to step forward across the floor. Luca looks up toward the high ceiling as the man notes that the inexplicable powers of the branched would only inspire dread in the hearts of regular citizens. As they walk up the stairs, the pontiff explains that the military forces are generally aware of their existence and notes that rumors are frequently whispered among the regular citizenry. The door opens with a creaking sound as the man leads Luca into a large bedroom, stating that this will be his room. He walks across the floor to stand in front of a tall window to bring something, while Luca watches him from behind. The pontiff calls out to Luca to get his attention, prompting the boy to look toward the thing he is holding. He presents a shiny brass musical instrument held in his hands, and Luca recognizes what it is. The leader explains that the object is called a trumpet and describes it as a remarkably advanced brass instrument. He points out the arrangement of pistons that allows for notes outside standard harmonic overtones, noting that building such an item is beyond the capability of current craftsmanship. Our boy looks on with wide eyes as the pontiff explains that the instrument is another unique creation of the spire. Luca raises his hand to touch but the guy doesn't let him do it. He states that Luca's role is to fight to protect the spire. The pontiff confirms that in return he will fully support Luca's studies to become a maestro, and Luca gives his direct agreement to the arrangement. The man tilts his head forward before standing by the arched window of the room. He tells Luca that there is a requirement to fulfill before he can officially take the boy on. He leads Luca out onto the high stone ramparts of a fortress overlooking the ocean where birds fly through the sky. The leader states that the boy must once again demonstrate his power for them. Luca follows the leader along the walkway and asks where he has been brought. He adjusts his hood as he turns around to notice two individuals approaching from behind. The pontiff identifies the two hooded figures as Luca's new comrades and explains that both of them are also branched individuals. He introduces the two companions as Demi and Zoe. Zoe looks back at Luca and apologizes for hitting him with a horse during the previous battle, which leaves the boy completely confused. As they continue walking along the stone wall, the pontiff explains that Thermi functions as a massive fortress city. He adds that this particular section is designed to defend the territory against maritime attacks. He asks if Luca can see the vessels blockading the harbor, and the boy looks out at the water to confirm that he sees a large number of ships. A wide view shows numerous ships floating across the open water as the pontiff explains that they are all warships sent by a neighboring nation. Our boy states that the presence of the fleet sounds bad. The man clarifies that the foreign vessels have been actively enforcing a trade embargo against the city for the past month. The pontiff continues his explanation, stating that the Spire serves as a repository for invaluable relics. He details how the architecture, language, weapon designs, and currency methods provided by the Spire are directly linked to their nation's total power. As the group walks up the fortress stairs, the leader notes that the Spire has other functions, but emphasizes that Luca's current duty is to protect it. They reach the top of the walkway where a few military officers are stationed along the battlements. Our boy observes a man wearing a feathered hat and realizes he must be the local commander, attracting the man's attention. The commander kneels on the stone ground to greet the leader as Your Holiness, and the pontiff welcomes him by the name of Pietro. Pietro remains in a respectful bow while Luca stands beside the pontiff, looking at the officer with surprise. He formally introduces Pietro, explaining that he is the imperator of the military forces for the Holy Realm. Our boy recognizes the weight of the commander's title, but a sudden shout from below commands the soldiers to form ranks, prompting the boy to look over the fortress wall. From the high stone battlements of the fortress, the pontiff and his companions look down at a massive courtyard where hundreds of soldiers have gathered to form neat, organized ranks. He turns his helmeted head toward Luca and addresses him by name. Luca observes the surrounding guards and notes to himself that the leader is truly the most powerful figure in the area, while the pontiff states that Luca's assignment is to take full command of the soldiers below. Outside the fortress, a foreign military flag flaps in the wind along a sandy beach where warships have landed and an extensive camp has been set up. A foreign soldier asks his captain why they are simply sitting around on the beach, prompting the bearded commander to take a sip from his cup and note that the answer should be obvious. The captain explains that they are currently waiting for the arrival of their siege weapons so that they can launch a full assault on the walls of the Holy Realm. The soldier notes that their camp looks entirely too relaxed given their dangerous position right in front of the gates, but the captain tells him not to worry because the enemy believes their forces are only there to maintain the harbor blockade. The captain adds that their plan is to rest on the shore until the defenders reduce their guard, which is when they will strike the gates, and the soldier agrees with the strategy. The commander tells his men to enjoy the sand because it is better than being stuck in the bilge of the flagship, just as a loud horn blast suddenly echoes across the shore. A glowing pattern of connected lines and dots reaches high into the sky above the fortress wall. The foreign captain and his soldiers stare forward with wide eyes. A straight pillar of sound strikes the earth directly in front of the fortress entrance. The defensive units advance together, their boots creating a steady rhythm on the stone path. Rows of infantry soldiers move out from the fortress structure in a tight block formation, holding their large shields and long spears ready. Luca stands on the high wall and blows into his bugle while the branch on his head makes a cracking sound. He remembers the pontiff stating that the first task for him is to eliminate the enemy forces gathered on the beach. Inside a stone meeting room, the leader sits at a table with his officers and notes his dislike for the enemy camp sitting right before their gates, stating that the invaders are likely waiting for the arrival of their siege weapons. He states that he wants the foreign troops completely removed down to the last man, asking Pietro if they are in agreement. Pietro lowers his head and states that he will carry out the order exactly as His Holiness says. The pontiff points toward the troops and informs Luca that he will be given one company to complete this mission in whatever way he deems correct. Our boy looks down anxiously and states that while he understands the objective, he has never held a command like this before, but the pontiff counters that Luca successfully led a retreat just 2 days prior. Luca explains that the retreat was accidental and notes his ignorance of their specific military signals, but the leader replies that the calls are the same ones Luca knows, which Pietro quickly confirms. Our boy looks back at the leader and says that placing actual lives in his hands is a massive responsibility, but the pontiff tells him to stop worrying and view the assignment as a simple test. Luca considers the idea of a test and glances back at one of the soldiers, who looks forward with wide, anxious eyes. The soldier gapes in surprise as Luca suddenly announces his decision to go through with the mission. Luca looks directly at the leader and specifies that he will do it in exchange for the brass instrument he was shown earlier. Our boy adds a final condition that he must not face any trouble if the mission fails, and the pontiff readily agrees to the terms. The nervous soldier silently curses his luck while the lesson states that failing as often as needed is acceptable because it is how a person grows and learns. Back to the present, the soldiers stand assembled in a tight block formation on the ground below, positioned between the high rocky cliffs directly outside the massive fortress gate. The commanding officer looks up anxiously and reflects on the situation, considering how a young boy has been given the absolute freedom to risk his life and the lives of his men. The officer continues his internal thoughts, noting that while dying in a war is one thing, he does not want to perish simply to act as a test for a child, while far above on the tower Luca prepares to play. Suddenly, the soldiers look up in surprise as a giant glowing grid of intersecting lines and dots suddenly spreads across the sky, creating an unexpected pattern of lights overhead. The officer asks his subordinate to confirm that everyone can see the glowing lines, and the soldier answers that he can, stating that he initially thought only the two of them were going crazy. He observes the foreign camp and states that the enemy forces can clearly see the pattern too as noisy chatter breaks out among their ranks. Luca lets out a quick breath and brings the advanced brass instrument directly to his lips to sound the call. A straight pillar of light descends from the sky with a loud blast, striking the earth as a clear marker directly in front of the enemy lines. The officer recognizes the beam as the young bugler's signal and loudly commands his entire company to advance. The infantry soldiers march forward in a synchronized line, as they carry their large wooden shields and long spears. While marching forward, the officer recalls that His Holiness said the boy could show them sound. The commanding soldier shouts for his men to advance at the double, while privately noting to himself that he has no idea what showing sound actually means. A loud rumbling sound echoes as the large company of soldiers runs out from the open fortress gate toward the battlefield, following the straight beam of light. A nearby enemy soldier clutches his helmet and wonders what the advancing troops are thinking. The foreign captain barks orders for his men to get ready and form their ranks. From an overhead view, the organized company of defensive soldiers moves across the open terrain in a tight wedge formation toward the waiting enemy line. An allied soldier notes that the situation feels strange because their legs seem to be moving naturally in perfect synchronization with the sound of the horn call. As the horn blast continues, an allied soldier shouts for the company to raise their shields just as an enemy archer fires a projectile from behind a wooden wall. Multiple arrows strike the wooden shields as the soldiers advance, and the commanding officer realizes that watching the movement of the light shows them the exact next move to make. The Allied army charges across the field from the fortress walls. The foreign captain sees them coming and loudly commands his men to prepare for the attack. The foreign soldiers stand in a row with their wooden shields. The Allied commander realizes that the young bugler's thoughts are entering directly into the minds of the troops. He watches the sky and notes that the sound and the light from the sky are actively guiding their movements. The officer shouts an order for the company to split, and the rows of foot soldiers immediately separate into two opposite sides. The Allied cavalry charges forward out of the fortress gates, riding directly through the open space created by the divided infantry. The foreign soldiers realize that a cavalry unit is attacking them as the horses break straight through their front lines. An overhead view shows the tactical light pattern tracking the split infantry moving to the flanks while the cavalry smashes into the center of the enemy formation. Luca stands on the edge of the battlements and continues to blow into his instrument while watching the clash below. Behind Luca, everyone is gathered and watching him closely. The pontiff stands on the stone wall beside Pietro and observes the battlefield. He explains that the lights above the field transmit information both audibly and visually. He touches his helmet and states that this ability allows for the rapid delivery of complex orders. He notes that the troops formed their columns in a highly coordinated manner. The pontiff calls the situation intriguing, and Pietro agrees with His Holiness. The leader raises a finger and states that he has observed another fascinating aspect of the power. The pontiff explains that anyone who hears the boy's signals experiences a boost in morale. He states that a prisoner captured in the previous battle made a specific claim. The captive noted that moving in time with the horn sound somehow felt good. He further explains that the prisoner felt as though he moved according to his own free will despite following the signals. He adds that people on the sidelines can only see the light, as the boy's true will is sent only to those receiving his commands. The pontiff gestures with his hand and describes the phenomenon as positively intriguing. Pietro looks out toward Luca and speaks his agreement to his holiness. Below the light beam, Luca holds the horn to his lips and continues to sound the command. In Luca's memory, Gerhardt rests against a pile of hay inside a stable while a young Luca sits nearby with a horn. The man calls out to get the boy's attention. As Luca continues to blow into his instrument, Gerhardt states that battles are never won by those who are soft-headed. He takes a drink from his wooden cup and explains that having quick wits in the middle of a fight and knowing the basic rules are the things that truly matter. The man points out that a successful army needs more than just strong fighters who only possess courage. Gerhardt asks if Luca is listening to his words, which prompts the boy to tell the man to be quiet internally. He provides a specific battlefield example while in the present, both sides of the men clash. Cavalry units are naturally vulnerable to projectiles. A reckless charge will allow enemy crossbowmen to easily destroy the horses. Despite the great power of crossbows, the weapons cannot be fired at a rapid pace. If the riders can get close enough, the cavalry charge will strike the enemy lines before the soldiers can fire their next volley. Gerhardt continues his explanation, moving on to the topic of the infantry, while Luca listens in silence. Infantry forces are not meant for attacking, but are instead designed to act as a mobile wall. He details how the infantry exists to block the enemy and protect the other troops, noting that the opposing army possesses a defensive wall of their own while soldiers on the field command their lines to push forward. The man states that every defensive wall has flanks and a rear, explaining that a commander must break the formation by striking where it is weak, while a soldier on the battlefield looks up at the tactical light pattern overhead. Gerhardt transitions to discussing longbows, which prompts Luca to think back on how the man constantly drilled those military tactics into his head without ever making his purpose clear. In a final memory, Gerhardt requests that someone be sure to teach Luca music, while in the present, Luca keeps his instrument ready. As the horn call continues to blast over the battlefield, a foreign soldier warns his captain that they need to retreat before the enemy cuts off their escape. The captain sees that the fortress gate has opened, thinking that it might be to let the wounded inside, which leaves him staring in surprise. The foreign captain commands his men to raise their flag and charge the gate. He orders them to storm the fortress to take the enemy leader's head. He also notes that the defenders left the entrance unguarded while pressing from behind. The captain commands his entire force to charge forward, telling them to ignore the enemy troops on the beach. The foreign soldiers run toward the fortress as the captain raises his shield to block incoming projectiles. Meanwhile, Lucas remembers Gerhardt saying that there is one more detail to consider. Resting against the pile of hay with his wooden cup, he explains that to completely remove an enemy force, a commander must take no prisoners and leave no survivors. Luca looks onward as he recalls these words. Our boy stands between the stone battlements of the fortress wall and blows a long blast from his horn. The foreign soldiers run toward the open fortress gate. The captain and his men look ahead as they see a light fall in front of the gate. Inside the gateway, rows of infantry soldiers stand ready behind a wall of shields and spears on both sides of the central light beam. The old man's lesson explains that a commander must make the enemy think they are exposed to draw them into the desired position. The ambushed troops keep their helmets lowered and spears raised in the shadows. Gerhardt's instruction details the necessity of quietly moving ambush forces into place. An overhead view reveals the foreign army gathered in the open area before the gate. The defensive troops block the front while two separate allied units move in from the sides to catch the enemy in a pincer movement. Our boy lets out a breath and lowers the brass instrument from his lips. He stands on the stone ramparts and states that the performance is over and the work is done. The pontiff claps his hands together on the high stone walkway while Pietro stands nearby, as Luca finally lowers his brass instrument. Down below the fortress entrance, the defensive soldiers look up at the massive stone structure as the straight beam of light fades from the sky. One of the soldiers states that the situation is strange and requests permission to speak from his captain, who tells the man to go on. The soldier remarks that he actually enjoyed the battle, and his captain responds that he was thinking the exact same thing. The pontiff claps his hands and announces that it is time to proceed. He calls out to Zoe, who pulls up a dark hood and gives the order to clean up the rest of the enemy forces. Luca looks on with confusion as Zoe walks away to stand at the edge of the stone wall, while the branch on the boy's head makes a sharp cracking sound. Our boy approaches Zoe at the edge of the battlements to ask what Zoe is doing, stating that it is a long way down to the ground. Zoe suddenly dives headfirst off the high castle wall. Luca looks over the side in surprise as a dark vortex opens in midair. A severed head of the foreign captain flies through the air while the pontiff explains to Luca that the boy has not yet seen Zoe in combat. The leader tells Luca to observe the area below. At the ground, Zoe leaps through the enemy ranks to eliminate the remaining soldiers. The pontiff looks down from the fortress battlements and states that Zoe is the strongest among his branched individuals while Luca watches in silence. The leader adds that Luca should make a concerted effort to befriend her because her protection is invaluable. Looking at the enemy soldiers thrown into the sky below, Luca realizes why she previously apologized for hitting him with a horse. The scene changes back to Greatwood Manor under a dark sky as the pontiff announces that he hereby anoints the boy. Inside a large room beneath a grand chandelier, the pontiff finishes his statement by welcoming Luca as one of his branched individuals while Demi stands in the background. Luca sits in a large chair and grips his new brass instrument, turning it over in his hands. The leader rests in his seat and tells Luca that he will henceforth act as his eyes, ears, and limbs in his quest to safeguard the realm and the spire. He states that he has yet to inform the boy about their enemy, which causes Luca to express his unfamiliarity with this threat. The pontiff turns toward Demi and commands her to show Luca. He explains that no one has better eyesight than Demi and adds that she can share what she sees with others. Demi tells Luca to cover one eye, and the boy copies her action to ensure he is doing it correctly while a branch on her head makes a cracking sound. Through Demi's shared vision, a massive city surrounded by mountains appears under dark clouds, with a colossal black spire towering over the landscape. Luca adjusts his hand over his eye as the foreign image fully takes hold. Our boy states that he can see another nation through his left eye, though he does not know which one it is. The pontiff confirms that the boy is seeing exactly what Demi sees. The leader explains that because of Demi's exceptional vision, Luca is looking at an island nation located very far away, while rows of armored soldiers march through a gate. The pontiff identifies the enemy they must defeat as the Aran Empire, as a large army marches from the gates of a stone fortress beneath the towering spire. Luca notes that he just saw another spire, and the pontiff confirms the statement, adding that exactly 9 spires exist in the world. A grid board on the table displays 9 small pillars placed across its surface to show the locations of each structure. The pontiff explains that the spire in their holy realm and the one in the Aran Empire are the largest of all, noting that as a pair they are known as the Great Spires. Our boy observes that they are waging a war over these structures, and the leader agrees with the statement but adds that they have another purpose as well. The pontiff looks toward a wreath hanging on the wall. He states that he wants to see the branched individual known as the Garland dead. Luca holds his hand over his eye and repeats the name of the Garland. The pontiff thanks Demi and tells her she may leave, prompting her to walk away. Luca lowers his hand and notes that the vision is gone. The leader sits in his chair with a game piece. He explains that this Garland is a branched individual with massive power. He knocks down a piece on the board. He notes that the soldier joined the Empire 4 months ago and has threatened other nations, warning that ignoring this player could allow the Empire to rule the world. Luca states that he was brought there to perform a task, and the pontiff confirms that the mission is to kill the Garland. The leader adds that he wants to gather all branched individuals to join the battle. Luca looks down at his new trumpet and thinks about the arrangement. Both characters sit in large chairs facing the fireplace. Luca asks if he can leave his job after he eliminates the Garland. The pontiff pauses before asking why the boy wants to leave his service. Luca looks toward the fireplace and reflects on the events of the day. He tells the leader that while he was playing the bugle earlier on the battlements, a specific thought came to his mind. Holding the advanced brass instrument close to his chest, our boy looks down. He states his realization that fighting in a war is not what he is meant to be doing. Luca looks at the flames and considers his current situation. He reflects that although he successfully escaped from a group of murderous thugs to find a place where he can study music, nothing has truly changed for him. Turning back toward the leader, our boy states that those are his exact terms for the arrangement. Luca explains that his days as a bugler will be completely over once he eliminates the garland. He adds a condition that the leader must continue to fully support his musical studies even after that mission is finished. Our boy offers the leader a final choice, stating that if the man refuses the terms, he will walk out of the room immediately and return the brass instrument. The pontiff remains completely silent for a moment. He slowly raises his hand to scratch the side of his long metal helmet while considering the boy's demands. He extends his open hand forward and states that the boy drives a hard bargain. Hearing this acceptance, Luca turns around with a smile. In front of the stone fireplace, the pontiff and Luca firmly shake hands to officially seal their new agreement. Luca presses the valves on his trumpet and asks the pontiff about the nature and true strength of the garland warrior. The pontiff answers that 4 months prior, the warrior's power completely destroyed a neighboring nation. Our boy remains quiet and seeks clarification on the event, pondering if the enemy killed the leader or captured the capital city. The pontiff states that the boy is mistaken and explains that the land itself was entirely flattened. The leader details that a single attack from the garland turned the entire country into a smoking wasteland, as a view reveals a giant crater in the ground surrounded by broken trees. The third chapter begins with the title Marching. A man looks out over a ruined landscape filled with rising smoke, thinking that the entire world is bad both here and everywhere else. The view reveals a massive crater where the figure sits alone, concluding that everything is completely ruined and that he is a failure. Birds chirp outside the window as Luca wakes up next to his new brass instrument and slowly sits up in bed. Our boy looks through the glass at the town below, where glowing patterns of lines and dots float across the sky. Watching the glowing signals hover over a tall spire, Luca recognizes the morning reveille and notes that the Holy Land has its own buglers. He remembers the leader saying that Luca will serve as their bugler and also take on the role of captain for their branched individuals. The leader adds that the earlier performance of Luca showed his capability. Luca reacts with surprise and confusion at the sudden statement that he is to be a captain. He explains that Luca will be responsible for issuing commands on the field and managing the other branched individuals outside of battle. The leader states that each branched individual is unique and irreplaceable, asking Luca to keep them in peak physical and emotional condition at all times, which causes Luca to grimace. Back to the present, Luca remembers the pontiff asking how the position of captain suits Luca, and our boy answers that it does not suit him at all while privately reflecting that he has been given a troublesome assignment. Luca looks down to find a man bound tightly in heavy ropes lying on the bed, who greets him with a morning salutation. The tied man introduces himself as Miura, a fellow branched individual, and confirms Luca's identity while Luca looks at him in surprise. Miura apologizes for disturbing Luca at the crack of dawn and requests that Luca untie the ropes holding him. As they walk down the corridor, Miura remarks that Luca did not see him at his best and notes that they are now bunkmates and the newest recruits since he joined 4 months prior. Luca asks for an explanation regarding why Miura was tied up, but Miura dismisses the matter for the moment. While moving past the large stone arches of the manor, Miura explains that the pontiff instructed him to show Luca the daily routine of the grounds, noting that there is not much to it. Miura lists their daily duties of attending worship, cleaning, and drilling on the grounds, adding that they are not permitted to leave, which prompts Luca to inquire about the nature of the training drills. Miura details that they learn about weapons, armor, and horse handling, explaining that they are required to run laps around the manor in full gear just like regular infantry drills, while Luca pants heavily from exhaustion. While heavily panting, Luca asks about the location of the remaining troops. Miura answers that the other soldiers are slacking off and notes that they are not a cohesive unit. Miura explains that the group has never even shared a meal together and adds that he is normally the only one running laps on the field, just as Luca loses his footing and falls to the ground. He stands over the fallen boy and extends his hand, stating that he finally has a companion to join him now. Miura continues his thoughts as a simple meal of bread and porridge sits on the wooden table, noting that while they are not entirely free, they receive everything they need. Sitting across from each other at a long table inside the vast hall, Miura suggests to our boy that living in the manor is actually a decent arrangement. Luca eats his food and internally reflects that Miura might be right, but he reacts with sudden surprise when Miura mentions his appointment as captain, quickly stating that it was the pontiff's choice and not his own. Our boy further explains that he never asked for the title because he dislikes being in battles, but Miura responds that it does not matter. Miura raises his wooden cup and states that when the pontiff makes a call, which prompts a confused response from Luca. He takes a sip from his mug and concludes that their own opinions do not matter, leaving Luca to look downward in silence. Miura places his wooden mug on the table with a loud clunk, starting to say something. He begins to tell Captain Luca that there is something he needs to know, but a sudden knock on the door interrupts him. Demi enters the room and announces that they have a job to do. Miura greets Demi and asks about the assignment, while Luca watches in silence. Demi explains that the group is being sent to take back a captured fort. The scene transitions to the active military camp established on the plains outside the walls of the large stone fortress. A commanding soldier stands inside a large tent and explains that the target is a former logistics base that was previously abandoned due to a lack of practical utility. He continues his briefing to the gathered leadership around a table, noting that one of their patrols discovered the fort is now occupied despite previously being thought empty. The four branched individuals sit together and listen to the briefing in silence. The commander details that there are about 100 men inside who are likely deserters from a different battlefield, but he notes that the fort itself is nearly impregnable. He explains that the fort is situated in the middle of a broad river and can only be accessed by a stone bridge on either side, adding that a battering ram is already on hand and ready for use while the soldiers outside laugh together. The commanding soldier explains that he determined the mission was beyond the capability of his unit alone, which is why he sent his fastest rider to Thermi. Commander notes his surprise that the pontiff made the journey himself, while the leader states that it is an opportunity to gain valuable field experience. The commander observes the visitors and notes that they must be the fabled branched individuals. The leader calls out to Miura, who acknowledges the call. The pontiff remarks that he believes Miura has not yet joined a battle, and Miura confirms that the statement is correct. The leader accepts the situation and prepares to deliver his orders. The leader addresses Luca and Miura directly, explaining that this mission is a chance for the two of them to show their mettle. Miura states his willingness to comply, prompting the leader to announce that the operation will begin at nightfall and explain how the plan will proceed. Outside the military camp as the wind blows past the line of tents, Luca sits quietly against a large tree when Demi calls his name. Demi stands before Luca and instructs him to cover his eyes with a piece of cloth, which our boy takes while noting that it is a blindfold. Demi explains that guarding their eyes from the sun will improve their night vision because the attack will happen at night, directing Miura to cover his eyes as well. Miura receives the cloth and expresses his appreciation while sniffling with tears on his face. Luca observes the tears and points out that Miura is crying again, which causes Miura to offer an apology. Miura states that he knows he is pathetic, but Luca clarifies that he wants to know what is wrong. With trembling fists, Miura confesses that he is a coward who is terrified of the upcoming mission tonight. Luca acknowledges the statement about fear and mentions that Miura must be a powerful individual, adding that he saw Zoe in combat that day and it was crazy. Miura replies he does not want to be compared to her. Miura notes that some branched individuals are exceptional while others are not, revealing that he is even afraid to use his own special ability. Miura explains that the object growing from his skull caused him to be bullied heavily as a child, leaving him with a deep sense of fear. He concludes by admitting that his fear of being forced into combat even made him try to escape from the manor the day before. Miura explains that Demi and the pontiff's troops caught him when he tried to run away. Our boy realizes this explains the ropes he saw on Miura that morning, while Miura notes that a similar thing happened when the leader first found him. Miura describes how the attack by the garland completely destroyed his house, his town, and his mother, wiping everything off the map. He recalls that the pontiff appeared afterward and proposed that they work together to take revenge against the garland. Miura explains that he initially believed this was the correct path for him to take. He notes that since his entire family was gone, the pontiff stated it was natural for him to seek revenge. Miura reveals that no matter how much he tried to hate the garland, he was unable to do so. Looking back at the ruins, Miura confesses that his only true feeling was relief that he was not the one trapped under the rubble. As the wind blows through the trees, Miura tells our boy that his survival in the upcoming night mission depends entirely on him. The guy reflects that he must try to survive even if everything is completely falling apart. Miura begs his captain to try and keep him alive during the operation, prompting Luca to look away and pull his blindfold over his eyes while muttering that he never agreed to become a captain. Under the bright full moon, guards stand watch along the high stone walls of the occupied fortress as one of the men complains about the freezing cold and hunger, expressing a clear desire to return home. Looking down from the ramparts, another soldier asks his companion what will happen next to them now that they are stationed at the fort, and the other guard agrees. The guards peer across the long stone bridge spanning the river and notice a lone figure standing on the opposite bank, considering whether it is a lookout from the Holy Realm. One of the guards assumes that the enemy forces will not initiate an attack in the middle of the night. High above on the walkway, the wind blows fiercely as Demi stands beside Luca and tells him that he needs to perform his duties well, which catches the young bugler off guard. Demi explains that they did not bring Miura back to the manor just to let him perish needlessly in a location like this fort. The pontiff approaches Luca on the walkway to inform him that the troops below are fully prepared, stating that the entire operation will begin at the sound of the bugle signal and asking if he is ready to proceed. Luca answers that he might be ready, prompting the leader to acknowledge his response as the boy lifts his brass instrument, presses the valves, and takes a deep breath to begin. Our boy blows his horn from the castle ramparts alongside Demi as the command sounds to begin the operation, causing glowing patterns of light to form in the night sky. The enemy guards look up in surprise as the loud horn blast echoes across the area and the grid of lights takes shape directly above them. On the ground below, Miura stands ready in a clearing as a vertical beam of light descends from the sky to mark his position. A guard peers over the edge of the fortress wall and notes his confusion about what is happening while two parallel lines of glowing light suddenly stretch down the entire length of the stone bridge. An overhead view shows the long stone bridge completely lined by the glowing tracking path, leading directly over the river toward the massive fortress entrance. Miura crouches into a starting stance on the path as the branch on his head makes a sharp cracking sound and several large protrusions emerge from his back. The pontiff announces that the rapid assault may commence, and Miura immediately drives his foot into the ground to launch himself forward with a blast of dust. Following the line of light, Miura sprints across the stone bridge at extreme speed, leaving a massive trail of smoke and dust behind him. As the horn blast continues to sound, Miura reaches the fortress gate at blinding speed beneath a widening triangular pattern of light while a burst of stone breaks from the ground. An enemy guard looks upward as a swinging Miura flies through the air along a line of light. Miura lands on his feet inside the courtyard of the large stone fortress. During the earlier strategy meeting, Miura addresses the leadership to confirm if the plan requires him to enter the fortress completely alone. The pontiff confirms the statement and explains that Miura needs to create a distraction inside the structure to lower the enemy defenses at the front gate. Luca asks for an explanation regarding how Miura intends to get past the walls. The pontiff states that Miura moves with extreme speed and can jump over the fortress walls in a single leap, while in the present, the enemy guards notice the bright light and demand to know the identity of the intruder. The leader adds that Miura's special ability has a major flaw because his eyes cannot track his physical movement at such high speeds, and Miura agrees with the statement. Miura explains that he is highly likely to crash into objects and injure his body because he is not durable, which the pontiff notes is correct. The horn blast continues to echo as the plan relies on the guided line of light to navigate the terrain, leaving the enemy soldiers confused by the signal. The operation relies entirely on the light generated by Luca's horn sound to guide Miura as he dashes across the courtyard, striking down enemy soldiers along the path. Even in the deep dark of night, the glowing signals from Luca continue to clearly mark the route forward for Miura. During the strategy briefing, the pontiff explains that Luca must depend on Demi's eyesight during the operation because her eyes can track even Miura's extreme speed. Inside the fort, the sound of the bugle echoes loudly as Miura moves past the guards, who note the sound of the war horn and realize they are under an enemy attack. An overhead view shows the zigzag path of light marking Miura's movements through the courtyard, while our boy states the realization that Miura will die if Luca makes a mistake, which the pontiff confirms is true. Demi and Luca stand together on the high walkway as Luca presses the horn to his lips, internally recognizing that carrying the lives of his comrades is exactly what it means to be a captain. Earlier that day while sitting under a tree, Luca instructs Miura to wait for the right moment once he is in the thick of battle and then provide him with a signal. While resting against the tree with his eyes covered by the blindfold, Luca states that he will help Miura escape. Miura sits nearby with his arms wrapped around his knees, looking toward Luca and asking for an explanation regarding how he can achieve an escape. During their conversation under the tree, Luca states that Miura can run away safely as long as a path is provided, noting that Miura wants to be free from these people. Miura agrees but states that leaving without permission is a capital offense, adding that the same rule applies to anyone helping a deserter. Luca replies that he already knows that information. Our boy remarks that deserters are usually executed, but Miura tried to escape the day before and the troops only brought him back, concluding that the branched individuals are simply too valuable to be killed. Luca states his belief that they would receive a light punishment, prompting Miura to express uncertainty and state that he wants to know why Luca is helping him. Our boy explains that he understands Miura's feelings to some degree. In the present, Luca internally reflects that he also wants to quit his current job. Down below, the enemy soldiers warn each other to stay away from the light, call for torches due to the darkness, and state that they should never have come to this location. Meanwhile, Miura focuses his gaze and charges directly down the street along the guided path, rushing toward a group of 3 enemy soldiers and killing them as the light lines extend past them. Outside a building, a lone soldier holds his food and remarks that a crust of rye is a poor selection for his last meal, just before Miura flashes past and strikes him down. His severed head falls to the ground. Miura continues his relentless advance through the structure, running at maximum speed along a straight, glowing path that guides his movements. An overhead view reveals the massive network of lines and dots created by Luca's signal, marking a complex path that winds through every section of the fortress layout. The heavy wooden barricade breaks apart with a loud crash. A group of armored guards with spears stands in the opening, expressing confusion at the sudden breach. Through the large stone gateway, the enemy soldiers run away into the distance. The remaining guards look on in surprise, stating that the enemy forces are fleeing. The pontiff praises the group for their success. On the castle ramparts under the full moon, Demi and Luca stand nearby while Miura sits on the stone floor, panting from heavy exhaustion. The leader states that the award for distinguished service belongs to Miura. Miura pants heavily and offers his thanks, while Luca watches him silently from a short distance away. Our boy asks Miura why he chose not to run away after being told to give a signal. As Miura continues to catch his breath, he reflects that having Luca around means he is no longer alone. Miura tells his captain to forget his previous words. Luca responds that he understands the situation, which leaves Miura looking back at him in silence. The next morning, sunlight fills a large stone manor. Walking down a long pillared hallway, the leader begins to speak about a specific plan. He states that Miura intends to resign from his position once they have successfully defeated the Garland. Luca confirms that the statement is correct. Our boy explains that the leader will still need to provide financial support for both of them after they quit their duties, prompting the pontiff to consider the request in silence. The pontiff asks if this is Luca's official stance as captain, while our boy looks on with confusion. The leader explains that a soldier's career path is decided by a superior officer, noting that the request shows Luca has formally accepted the captain role. Luca accepts the situation as long as the pontiff agrees to those specific terms. The pontiff asks Miura if he agrees with the arrangement, and Miura answers that he does, prompting the leader to state that the matter is settled. The leader tells Luca that he expects great things from him as the captain. Our boy points out that the pontiff can be reasoned with, but Miura expresses doubt about whether this decision is for the best, causing Luca to respond with confusion. Miura explains his reasons for fighting, stating that he is not trying to avenge his family or retake his homeland for a grand cause. Miura reflects on fighting merely to quit and notes that he always runs away. But Luca stops him by saying it doesn't matter. Our boy states that the entire world is bad anyway and notes that anyone would want to escape from it. He tells Miura to simply accept the situation. Miura suggests that Luca might be suited to the position of captain, but Luca rejects the thought completely. Meanwhile, Demi is moving through the wide hall. Demi walks down a staircase and knocks on a door before entering to inform the pontiff that an imperial regiment is marching 300 miles from the Holy Realm, noting that they have several branched individuals with them. The pontiff acknowledges the news. The leader, now wearing the head of Gerhardt, sits alone at a table, smiling as he states that they will have fun. Far away, a massive ball of swords and spears floats high above a battlefield as the pontiff observes that a war between the branched individuals will finally begin. An armored hand clenches into a tight fist before opening wide directly below the floating cluster of weapons. The weapons launch violently downward, striking the soldiers who are attempting to flee across the field. Near a horse, an Imperial soldier observes that they have not reached their destination, and his companion notes that they are not yet inside the holy territory, concluding that their march must continue forward. Standing in front of a massive army of spearmen, the Imperial leader states that the plan is to kill the Bugler kid to bring peace to the world, and his partner confirms the objective.